So welcome to the Israel Institute for Advanced Studies. For many years, we're hosting a research group and individual fellows on every possible aspect, and we give them the opportunity to convene here conferences and one-day workshops with the scholars they want to invite. And this year we were very happy to host Miriam Reiner from Bar-Ilan University as one of our individual fellows. And I think immediately at the beginning of the year, you came up with the idea of having a one-day conference on the topic that is really close to her heart and her research. And it was postponed, of course, because of the war, but that should not surprise you. That happened with every event we were planning in the past 5 years or so. But we are happy that you are here today, and all that is left for me to do is to wish you a fruitful and successful workshop, and I hope you'll enjoy it and feel that you're doing updated research. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Yitzhak Hen, Itzik, for your kind words. And let me begin by thanking the Institute for this year's hospitality and expressing my deep appreciation for its dedicated staff, Itzik, Iris, Karen, Tehila, Shai, and everyone else who shielded our residency from the turbulent times we had lived through. Against all odds, they successfully preserved this space as an exceptional intellectual hub, offering not only stimulating encounters, but also peace of mind and place to think, write, and develop new ideas. Each time I stepped through the doors, leaving the outside chaos behind, I felt as if I was crossing into a sanctuary. I'm certain I'm not alone in this feeling. I'm certain I'm not alone in this feeling. I also thank the entire staff for helping me with organization today's event, and all the including logistics, which were not that simple. As you heard, we had to postpone it and reschedule it and so on. Therefore, as a token of our profound gratitude, my colleague, Professor Ilya Rodov, Chief Editor of Ars Judaica and the head of our department, and I have decided to present the Institute with the missing volumes of our journal that you actually have in your library, but not complete. So Ilya brought not all, but most of the missing volumes, and they will hopefully enter the library soon.
The mic isn't working.
The mic isn't working. Okay, now it's better? All right. As most of you know, today's colloquium, as we heard, was originally scheduled for March, but had to be postponed due to the war. But fortunately, we are able to gather here today to see and hear each other. I'm grateful to everyone who managed to attend in person and join us via Zoom as well. I hope they're hearing us there outside in a cyberspace. I'm also thrilled to see many familiar faces among you, including my teachers, dear colleagues, friends, and students. Furthermore, I'm immensely obliged to our lecturers. They not only readily accepted my invitation and proposed the fascinating topics that we will hear today, but they were also readily willing to adapt to unforeseen changes and reschedule of this event. When I first began to conceive this theme for colloquium almost nearly a year ago, I was deeply moved by the works of Maurycy Mankowski that I just saw while traveling to Buenos Aires, one of the Polish Jewish artists I research, and we chose his imagery for our poster. His works depict the profound contrast between the serene beauty and appalling misery of Jewish life in fin de siècle Europe. In many ways, these images also mirror our current reality, confronting devastating destruction, war, and human suffering on one hand, while struggling to maintain humanity, hope for peace, and better future on the other. The depolarization of our own time also reflects the historical extremes of assimilation and anti-Semitism that characterized various periods of European Jewish past. Several of today's lectures will tackle these extremes across visual art, literature, and culture, exposing lesser discussed themes that deal with extremes of violence, non-belonging, and danger. Simultaneously, other papers will offer examples of solutions found through education, humanism, and universalism. The socio-political and temporal shifts that have influenced the study of Jewish art, literature, and culture were previously explored in the two workshops that were held at our Department for Jewish Art at Bar-Ilan University. They were organized by our dear colleague and friend, Professor Olaf Terpitz from the Center for Jewish Studies in Graz, and myself. Olaf, who unfortunately could not join us in person, although he was meant to be here, but is with us on a screen, will tell us a bit more about those events. So can we now have Olaf on a screen? Olaf, okay. All right. Can we hear you?
Okay, can you hear
Very
me?
good. Yeah, very good.
Okay, so thank you very much, Professor Reiner, Miriam, Professor Ren, dear colleagues, students, and friends on Zoom and on site. First of all, I want to thank you for your greetings and your inspiring words to the workshop Heights of Beauty, Depths of Suffering. And I'm very happy and grateful that this scholarly exchange could be realized despite the current challenging times. This workshop is, in a way, a continuation of a highly productive and lively cooperation between the Department of Jewish Art at Bar-Ilan University and the Center for Jewish Studies at Graz University. Before going into more detail, I want to take the opportunity to thank Professor Reiner for her tireless commitment, her energy, and her abounding humor and ideas. Our cooperation includes, amongst other things, an ongoing Erasmus exchange, joint excursion to Prague and Krakow, and two workshops. The first one, you see the slide, in 2023, focused on the period of the 1990s and asked what impact this decade had on the development of Jewish studies. The fall of the Berlin Wall and with it of the communist societies, the unification of Europe, the globalization of the Holocaust, and other events of this era, so our assumption shape our research, knowledge, and interpretation. Along with the rise of the digital age, identity politics, and postmodern questions concerning race, gender, and ethnicity, academic fields focusing on Jewish cultures and arts experienced a significant turn. In particular, the 1990s witnessed, after the dissolution of the bipolar world order, new dynamics between East and West. For instance, archives in the former Soviet Union and other places became accessible again, research centers and Jewish museums were established, and new forms and possibilities of interaction, of knowledge circulation and knowledge creation emerged. The second workshop took place last year and was dedicated to European encounters, East-West discourse in modern Jewish art, literature, and culture. It focused on the intricate relationships between East and West and situated them more broadly since the Enlightenment. From the 18th century on, Western European centers of learning increasingly perceived themselves as models of civilization in opposition to the alleged backwardness and barbarity of the continent's eastern regions. In the eyes of the West, Eastern Europe was the other, unknown, threatening, inferior, in need of improvement from the superior West. The workshop aimed at examining encounters between Eastern European and Western European Jews that challenge and complicate this historical divide and scrutinize the geographical cultural dichotomy of East and West. It sought to identify processes and phenomena of interaction that transcend this dichotomy. Before handing over now to Professor Reiner and the first panel of this year's workshop, I want to express my gratitude to all involved in the organization of the workshop, and I hope it will foster and further a vivid dialogue among us, which is so crucial to scholarly exchange. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Olaf. Okay, and we are opening the first panel. I'm very glad to invite our dear colleague from the department, Dr. Tzvi Orgad, who is the first speaker, and I will be introducing you now briefly. Tzvi Orgad, Dr. Tzvi Orgad is a senior lecturer in the Department of Jewish Art at Bar-Ilan University. His research examines the religious, social, and intellectual dimensions of Jewish culture through the study of synagogue art, Hebrew illuminated manuscripts, museums, and other forms of visual expression. Combining methods from art history, semiotics, and cultural history, he explores how Jewish communities translated beliefs, values, collective memories, and communal identities into visual form from the Middle Ages to the modern period. Tzvi is the author of Eliezer Zussman of Brody, the early modern synagogue painter and his world, published in 2022, and currently recipient of 4-year Israel Science Foundation research grant for the project Vanishing Visions, Synagogue Painting in Israel. Today, Tzvi will talk about the title of his lecture is Jewish Visual Reinterpretation of Noah's Ark in 19th Century Europe Between Emancipation and Anti-Semitism. Tzvi, please.
Thank you, Miriam. Just try to operate this. Olaf, can you see the presentation? No. Okay, so I have to share it, right? Yes. Okay. Okay, so thank you for inviting me to this exciting conference. And okay, so now, Sada? Okay, I'll do my best. So, why did 19th century Jews increasingly turn to Noah's Ark, a story rabbinic tradition never regarded as central biblical narrative? This question lies in the center of my lecture. In rabbinic literature, Noah occupied an ambiguous position. He is compared with Abraham, whereas Abraham actively sought to save others, Noah saved only himself and his family. Moreover, he was not one of the nation's fathers, but one of humanity's. Consequently, Noah, the builder of the ark, never became a major Jewish hero. Yet, during the 19th century, he as in his ark increasingly appeared in literature and ritual objects and in synagogue paintings. As I will demonstrate, the biblical motif was not new, but its significance changed dramatically. I argue that 19th century Jewish culture gradually detached the ark from the flood. While the ark became a symbol of refuge, continuity, and survival, the flood increasingly came to represent modern catastrophe, anti-Semitism, and historical instability. Okay. I will begin with emphasizing that Noah's Ark was not absent from Jewish visual culture before the 19th century. Illustration of the Ark appeared in Hebrew printed book from the 17th century onwards, especially in editions of Tzene Reine, prayer books, and Haggadot. Synagogue painters also employed this motif. An example appears in the synagogue of Yosefov Nad Viswo, where Noah's Ark was part of a larger symbolic program as early as the 18th century. There, the Ark sailing on troubled water was placed alongside the binding of Isaac, the rivers of Babylon and Jerusalem. Such juxtapositions suggest that the motif already carried associations of exile, redemption, and return. Another image of the Ark on the summit of the Ararat appears that was created in 1831 is at the Ramah Synagogue. Both images present Noah's Ark as part of the biblical narrative rather than a response to contemporary events. The emphasis is on salvation, covenant, and divine protection. The Ark sailing or resting on the peak of Ararat prevailed well into the 20th century. This persistence of traditional representation is significant. As we shall see, new meanings would later be attached to this motif, but they were built upon rather than substituted for these earlier visual traditions. These images established Noah's Ark as a familiar component of Jewish visual culture. Hence, the 19th century intensified and redirected these meanings. Against this background, the 19th century introduced new social and political interpretations of Noah and the Ark. Emancipation encouraged Jews to seek biblical figures that could speak to both Jewish tradition and universal humanity. Noah belonged to all humanity. The post-flood covenant was universal. The rainbow symbolized peace among nations. Noah, therefore, offered a biblical language through which Jews could articulate aspirations for civic equality, social integration, and moral participation in European society. At first, these new meanings remained closely tied to the traditional symbolism of covenant and renewal. This trend is evident in ritual art, for example, on Torah crowns, here you can see on the right, and on finials. Examples survive from many places in Eastern Europe. The same process is evident in Mizrach and Shiviti plaques. Here, ideas of peace, reconciliation, and moral renewal. Such representations closely align with the ideals embraced by many Jewish communities during the age of emancipation. They expressed the hope that catastrophe could be followed by coexistence and that Jews could find a secure place within European society. Yet, the very forces that made Noah an attractive universal symbol also brought new anxieties. The 19th century saw not only emancipation, but also nationalism, anti-Semitism, mass migration, and political violence. As a result, Jewish culture increasingly separated the two elements of the biblical narrative. The ark became a symbol of refuge and continuity, while the flood came to represent the threatening realities of modern history. In the second half of the 18th century, European visual culture was profoundly shaped by Gustave Dore's biblical illustrations. Dore's depictions of the flood emphasized terror. Bodies drown, animals perish, and humanity faces destruction. Dore transformed the flood into a visual language of catastrophe. His images circulated across Europe and were widely reproduced in books and popular prints. Around that time, an important source of this transformation took shape in Polish literature. In 1886, Henryk Sienkiewicz published The Deluge, the second volume of his trilogy. The novel recasts the mid-17th century Swedish invasion of Poland as a foundational national narrative. In this narrative, the flood became a metaphor for collective catastrophe, while Jasna Góra monastery served as a kind of Noah's Ark, preserving the nation during its darkest hour. These symbolic associations, the destructive flood versus Noah's Ark as a means of salvation, were widely known throughout Poland and part of the cultural environment in which Jewish communities lived. Jewish writers adopted similar imagery, although they didn't see the ark as a source of survival, but maybe an attempt, or sometimes failed attempt to survive. After the Kishinev pogrom of 1903 and the 1905 revolution, images of flood, storms, and overwhelming waters became central metaphor in Jewish literature. Sholem Aleichem. Der Mabul offers perhaps the clearest example. He describes the contemporary world as a flood of blood and tears. People are swept away by forces beyond their control, and the ark survives, but only as a fragile vessel drifting throughout chaos. And he says, the Tommel is vorüber, das Leben ist gerettet, as Reife, a große Feier, a Wolkenbruch, a Sturm, a Mabul, a ganzer Mabul, and I just move ahead, where he described unser klein Schiffele, was trägt sich bald 2000 Jahre ahin, on a Führer und on a Breg. Gott der Herr nur weiß, wohin und wenn wir kennen zu stehen. Shimon Dubnov also employed flood imagery, transforming it from literary metaphor into a historical category. After the Kishinev pogrom, Dubnov repeatedly described contemporary Jewish reality as an era of flood, emphasizing the destructive forces threatening the continuity of Jewish life in Eastern Europe. Yet, unlike Sholem Aleichem, Dubnov interpreted catastrophe within a broader historical framework. Destruction was followed by renewal. The flood represented a painful but potentially transformative stage in Jewish history. The metaphor recurs at Sholem Asch's Von Mabul, before the flood. In his second volume, Warsaw, Revolutionary Ideologies became floodwaters. Some characters believe that coming flood will wash away injustice and create a better society, while others fear that rivers of blood will destroy everything. Ash thus transforms the flood into a debate about the promises and the dangers of modernity. This literary development found visual expressions in synagogue art. The clearest visual expression of the symbolic separation between the ark and the flood appears in the Kupa synagogue in Krakow. Significantly, both images appear side by side, showing that community did not choose between catastrophe and salvation, but preserved both in the same place and the same time. The most dramatic image appears on the ceiling. Here, the ark struggles amid enormous waves, and the inscription identifies the scene not as Noah's Ark, as was common, but as a flood itself. The composition recalls Douret's visual language while softening the horrors. There are no corpses or scenes of mass death. Nevertheless, the atmosphere remains tense and uncertain. The image acknowledges danger without surrendering hope. The second scene on the west wall, in this scene, Noah stands before the ark as animals approach in orderly pairs. The scene focuses on the preparation for the flood and evokes contemporary concerns about migration and refuge. The contemporary viewers living in the age of mass migration, for them, the image could evoke broader concern about refuge, displacement, and collective survival. This interpretation becomes even more compelling when considered alongside the story of Mordechai Manuel Noach, who in 1825 attempted to establish a Jewish city of refuge, Ararat, on the Grand Island in New York. Although the project failed, it captured the imaginations of later writers. Israel Zangwill revisited the episode in his 1899 story, Noah's Ark, included in the compilation Ghetto Tragedies. There, the dream of refuge collapses into disappointment, yet the story also reflects the broader search for solutions to Jewish insecurity in the modern world, whether through territorialism, immigration, or Zionism. Zangwill's interest in Noah's project was far from accidental. Initially a supporter of Theodor Herzl and an active participant in the early Zionist movement, Zangwill grew increasingly concerned about the practical challenges facing Eastern European Jewry. After Herzl's death and the controversy over the Uganda proposal, he broke with mainstream political Zionism and founded the Jewish Territorial Organization, ITO, in 1905. In Zangwill's hands, the Ark became a fragile and uncertain project, reflecting both the hopes and the limitations of modern Jewish political thought. Taken together, these literary and artistic works reveal a clear pattern. The modern Jewish encounter with Noah did not yield a single meaning. Instead, it produced two complementary symbolic languages. The Ark offered a vision of continuity, refuge, and communal survival. The flood expresses the experience of catastrophe, displacement, and historical uncertainty. I'm sorry. Together, they provide Eastern European Jews with a powerful framework for understanding modernity. It is not that 19th century Jews discovered Noach, rather they transformed an existing biblical motif into a modern symbolic language. Through literature, ritual art, and synagogue paintings, these images enable Jewish communities to interpret both the promises and dangers of modernity. In this sense, Noah's Ark and the flood were no longer merely stories from Genesis. They became complementary symbols through which modern Jews understood and explained catastrophe and survival. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tzvi. This was really a very new subject for me that I didn't know you were researching so far, although I know that you're already published or you're publishing already this article about it. It's really very compelling, interesting, relevant for our times. So I'm opening the discussion, questions. Ziva.
In that of you, what is the flag?
Maybe take a microphone. So the people on Zoom.
You make the lights darker, so yes. Yeah. I just raised my voice.
No. Check like this.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Stage.
In the picture on the screen, what is the flag on Noah's Ark?
So the red flag.
That's what I thought.
Yes. Okay. So yes, I also asked myself, what is this flag? And this flag is the flag of the Judah tribe, and the Judah tribe is the flag of the Messiah. And Herzl was the Messiah. And here we see a symbolic picture. We don't know who is this character. It's Noah, of course, but maybe it's Herzl, maybe it's another symbolic figure for the Messiah, bringing or taking the Jewish people to the land of Israel.
Can I also suggest that it may simply be the USSR? No, but for the basic reason, the United States was closed at that time. There was really nowhere to run, and except for Russia. You know, Russia accepted immigrants. During the war, it became a real problem after the invasion of Poland. But before that, if you were crazy enough to be a communist, as far as they were concerned, you know, Baruch haba. It's the same, yeah, if you're crazy enough to want to be an Israeli, that's it, you know.
Yes, of course, Baruch haba, and then straight to
So Baruch haba, the whatever we got.
yeah.
That isn't what you got. At least we're not having pogrom.
Of course, yes, it might be a political statement, right? Because it's this painting was painted between, we don't know exactly, between the 1920 and 1939. So yes, it fits.
The flag seems to have some symbol on it.
Yes, but I think this is just you know,
Just
to
retro.
show that it is folded. It is
Okay.
yeah. Thank you.
Any more questions? Yeah, Susan. Sorry.
Other than Gustav Doré, and were there other painters who painted the destruction that remained after the flood?
Okay, so I don't know about other painters who painted this destruction. I know from a lecture about a Jewish artist, I don't remember his name, who painted the Ark, but not as a sign, not with the destruction. I think more with hope. So I don't know any others, but Doré was very, very influential. Every house had his books. Yes.
Thank you.
Zvi, do you think this is sort of a long shot question, but do you think there's any influence from the depiction in the Sistine Chapel of Noah's Ark? Because we know that Michelangelo's depictions got into the Mantova Haggadah. So is it possible? Because the art, all of us who studied art history know that the depictions of the Ark change over time.
Okay, thank you. Also, very good question. And I think that Michelangelo's painting did not, of course, was not, people did not look at it, yes, but it influenced how people saw or what they saw in the Ark. But the change that happened in the 19th century was looking at the Ark from different views. Okay? It was no longer representing hope, only hope, or salvation. It was something more earthly and disturbed and disturbing.
More questions? I have just a short question, or you can make it shorter if it's too long. I was wondering in Kupa Synagogue, why they chose these images. It's like continuing what Ziva said, that it's the already time towards the big immigration, World War II is threatening. So is there any connection? Who did this renovation so late, and why did they choose this specific iconography to do?
This is the big questions that we really don't have good answers. I think if you look at these synagogues, there is the Noach Ark in Ramah synagogue, but it's from the beginning of the 19th century, so it wasn't so politically discussed. But I think that it shows the pressure that Jews in Poland, in Krakow, faced, and they didn't want to say it, to express it, to say, okay, we are in trouble, but they painted it. They gave hints for their position, situation.
All right, thank you. We are very good on timing, so thank you, Zvi, for this. And I was very impressed with your Yiddish also. Our next speaker, I just want to stop sharing. Okay, here is Olaf. Our next speaker is Professor Olaf Terpitz, and we're now switching to literature with two final papers of this panel. So Professor Olaf Terpitz teaches Jewish literatures and cultures at the Center for Jewish Studies, University of Graz, where he serves as a deputy director and co-editor of the center's book series published by Berlau. His research interests encompass Slavic Jewish encounters, European Jewish literatures and cultures, comparative studies, memory studies, and translation. Among his publications are the German translation and edition of Shloime Ansky's World War I diary, Der Churban in Poland, Galizien und der Bukowina, and numerous edited volumes, including Places and Forms of Encounter, in Jewish Literatures, Transfer, Mediality, and Situativity, published in 2021, and Yiddish and the Field of Translation, Agents, Concepts, and Discourses Across Time and Space, published in 2020. He is currently preparing a handbook on German Jewish literature focusing on interactions that will be published in 2027. Today's lecture that Professor Terpitz will give us today is entitled "Violence and Poetic Language." Okay.
So can you see the presentation?
Yes, we see it, but not in the full screen form. Can
Oh,
you- Yeah.
no.
Okay. And now also go to this bottom right sign for enlarging it.
No. So no. I tried again.
No, that's fine. Just go before to the very right side of the bar at the bottom. You have plus and minus in order to enlarge the picture. And before that, no, don't do it. Don't enlarge it. It was fine. Before that, to the left is a little sign that you should click on, and then it will enlarge the screen.
Yeah, that's what I did, and I have it here, but you
We don't
can't
see
see
it
it.
like that.
Ah.
Hello, Felicitas. Yeah, no, now we are out. You're trying again. Here, Elena Solomon is telling you that you should
Okay.
that you should stop sharing and then enlarge it, possibly.
Yeah, that's. Did it work now?
No,
No.
maybe we should just leave it. And
Okay. I mean, basically, it's quotations.
you don't have that many
Oh.
more than many slides.
No.
All right, so just go ahead.
Okay, one last try. No. Okay, so thank you very much for your kind words. Beauty and suffering, violence and poetic language. There seems to be a discrepancy, even a contradiction between those concepts. However, modernity enabled and created those very tensions. Since the destruction of the first temple, Jews documented and reflected on catastrophes, on violence and expulsion, and conceptualized them in terms such as Khurban, the Viennese Gezerah, the Shoah. Their responses found entry into the Bible, into prayers, and in modern times into a variety of literary and non-literary texts. As David Roskies outlines, they were often religiously informed. With the Haskalah and the emergence of a secular understanding of the word, however, other and more individualized and aestheticized interpretations developed. The atrocities committed against the Jewish population in Eastern Europe during World War I, for instance, featured prominently in poems, letters, stories, diaries, etc. Violent events found literary and aesthetical responses. After the assassination of Alexander II, the Jewish population in the Russian Empire witnessed since the 1880s a growing state discrimination against them and a growing anti-Semitism. Experience of violence, be it through pogroms or the atrocities during World War I, found entry into the arts and literatures. In different languages and in different genres, reaching from poems to short stories, to novels, to semi-fictional documentaries, writers addressed this experience and linked them to questions of, for instance, justice and ethics. As it is exemplified in the short story Der Tselem, The Cross, from 1909, by the Yiddish poet Lamed Shapiro, who was born in Russia and became famous, and after that forgotten, as an American Jewish writer who addressed in a very condensed way in this story questions of experiences of violence, of self-justice, of revenge, but put in a literary, almost poetic frame. What exactly do I mean with poetic language? Beyond the realm of poetry, poetic language, also a narrative genre, can be characterized by several aspects and techniques. It is a highly imaginative, condensed form of expression. In contrast to prosaic, literal language, it appeals directly to senses and feelings. It uses devices such as metaphors, similes, personification. It deploys sound and rhythm schemes, for instance, alliteration. It shows a high density of content, thus conveying a complex content into a few words, and it relies on references and suggestions. Focusing exemplarily on the Yiddish diary on World War I by Schleumer and Ski, the talk sets out to analyze the often tense relation between the depicted events and the way they are depicted, which language and which imagery are used, and how they mirror the ambivalences of modernity. Schleumer Sander Rappaport, who became known under his pen name Schleumer or Shimon Ansky, displayed an impressive scope of interests and facets in his work. He worked in this way as a publicist and writer who published in Yiddish as well as in Russian. His presumably most famous text is the play Der Dybbuk. That is the Dybbuk in Yiddish, Der Dybbuk zwischen zwei Welten, that premiered in 1920 in Warsaw. Apart from his creative work, Ansky can be considered as co-founder of the Jewish ethnography in the Russian Empire. Together with Shimon Dubnov and others, he founded, in the spirit of the OPR, that is the Society for the Promotion of Enlightenment among the Jews of Russia, the Jewish Historical Ethnographic Society in 1908 in St. Petersburg. Shortly before the First World War, he conducted ethnographic expeditions founded by Baron Vladimir Ginsburg to the Pale of Settlement that was to be dissolved officially only by the end of the war. During those expeditions, he documented aspects of East European Jewish life, collected oral folk tales, songs, and material artifacts together with colleagues such as the photographer Solomon Yudovin and the ethnographer Susman Kiselgov. The experience Ansky made with respect to the scientific approach and societal relevance would guide and enrich his journeys shortly afterwards through the war zones between Austria-Hungary and Russia. He traveled repeatedly as a representative of the Yekopor, that is Еврейский комитет помощи жертвам войны, the Jewish umbrella relief organization for war victims in Russia, to Galicia, Bukovina, and Poland. During his sojourns in the war zones, Ansky drew up notes in Russian that he intended to publish in Russian periodicals. However, he decided to use them as material and reworked them into his rhetorically detailed and factographically expanded Yiddish diary. This was posthumously published under the title Der Jiddische Chorben von Point, Galicia und Bukowina, and was published in Vilnius, Warsaw, and New York between 1921 and 23. It is sometimes referred to as Chorben Galicia, the destruction of Galicia, which probably is a retranslation of the Polish short title included in the first edition, Zniszczenie Galicji. With respect to war literature, it appears as particularly momentous that Ansky takes a decidedly Jewish perspective in it. Right at the beginning of his diary, he emphasizes the objectives and intentions of his texts. As die Jedjes von Galicia haben klar bewiesen, was vor Chorben dort kommt vor, habe ich bestimmt anzuwenden, den alle Keures, die wie es ist, reinzugleiben sich ahin, herumfahren die Chochewe Stadt, feststellen die Granizen von der Katastrophe und die Kreuz von der Neut und kommen zurück mit faktischen Materialien schon nicht beten, noch murren hilf, fragt die Galizianer Juden. That is,
Olaf,
Yeah.
we see all the time the first slide. If
Oh,
you have
no,
translation,
yeah,
we didn't
yeah.
see it.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so when the news from Galicia clearly showed the reality of the devastation, I decided to do whatever I
No, we
could.
don't see any
Okay. Um, okay.
Okay, it's good now.
Yeah. So when the news from Galicia clearly showed the reality of the devastation, I decided to do whatever I could to get into Galicia, tour the ruined towns, confirm the scope of the crisis and the destitution, and come back to Russia with facts and figures. Then I would not plead for, but demand help. Ansky identifies explicitly the extra-literary vectors of his writing endeavor at this point. On the one hand, he aims to achieve a factual, virtually ethnographic historic documentation of events and dispositions, interspersed with his own views, and on the other hand, he strives to gain the actual material and spiritual support of the Jewish population, the organization of relief work, also with regard to providing assistance in dealing with the Russian authorities, and eventually the preservation of precious artifacts, mostly those from synagogues and prayer houses. Whereas Ansky programmatically discusses the contents of his diary and his approach of collecting voices in the respective regions, he does not comment on the literary strategies applied or the aesthetic rhetorical means involved in the text composition. Nonetheless, Ansky's Talkbuch von Horben is characterized by its semantic dual encoding. While the ethnographer and historian Ansky attempted to document the war atrocities and the social plight of the Jewish population by using as many facts as possible, the writer Ansky had to find the appropriate cognitive, textual, and literary form. This form transcends the genres of autobiography and diary in the end, due to the variety of incorporated text types, such as eyewitnesses' accounts, letters, dialogues, observations, and announcements by the authorities. It is exactly this oscillation of Ansky's text between literary genre, between the knowledge realms of ethnography, historiography, and literature, and their respective objectives and implications, that made it a major societal and commemorative piece of World War I history, even if its reception was disrupted. The Talkbuch von Horben encompasses 4 parts and about 600 printed pages. In the first chapters, Ansky defines programmatically the scope and method of his inquiry, that is, documentation and support, polyphony of individual voices, for instance, letters and conversations, documents, his travel routes that led from the political centers of Russia, notably St. Petersburg, Moscow, Kiev, and Warsaw, to the war-torn Austrian-Hungarian periphery of Galicia. After that, he meticulously and chronologically dissects the events in the war zone and the impact they had on the Jewish population. On the level of perception, he describes the rumors and legends that were spread about Jews in diverse societal strata, mainly the Russian army and authorities, but also the local Polish and Ukrainian populations, and the media and the accusations made against them, predominantly of espionage, all of which had the intent of discrediting Jews in any possible instance of power or authority. On the level of war atrocities, he addressed the regular looting of property, rapes, arbitrary killings, and the general deprivation of their civil rights. Ansky's narration Respectively, the composition of his polyphonic text is orchestrated by a spatio-temporal movement through Poland, Galicia, and the Bukovina that yields, though chronologically structured, only a few references to historical time or the Jewish calendar. The narrator, respectively his alter ego Ansky, moves through the war scene primarily with the train that, in previous times of peace, epitomized connectedness and modern Europe. This means of transportation that not only connected Europe, but, as it were, created it, now marked the break in cultural and actual time and space with all its delays and disruptions. In the description of his impressions and perceptions of the war-ravaged Brest-Litovsk, one of the central links between Eastern, Central, and Western Europe at the time, Ansky refers to metaphors of the body and wild nature. To be more precise, he uses a different reference system in his description. The civil, social, and cultural entity of the city becomes an animal that is mortally wounded by its enemies. Ansky writes, Es wird beschafft acker viel, als die Kreuze Stadt, was hat noch erst Nächten gelebt mit aller Chushim, hat bekommen a deutliche Wund und starbt ab. Es stellt sich vor, als das ist a Kreuze gesunder Reihe, bei welchem man hat geöffnet die Adern und ihr Blut fließt a Reus von Guf mit a heißem Strom. Von Minute zu Minute wird sie blasser, schwacher und bald wird sie liegen a kalte und a teute. Und noch beulete streichen unter dem tragischen Aussicht von Stadt die Aeroplanen, welche schweben und drehen sich in der Luften wie schwarze Kronen über deutlich Verwundeten. Dort sich, als die Kreuze Räubvögeln wachten mit Ungeduld, als der verwundete Ries soll rauslassen, dem letzten Atem, die Idee erräuft zu werfen sich auf ihm und nehmen Reisen stickerweise sein nicht abgekehrten Ruf.
Move,
is-
move the slide again. We didn't see the translation.
Can you see it now? The big and beautiful city?
No,
It's the second part of
no, it's the
Okay.
same from before.
Doesn't it move at all?
No.
No. I will stop the presentation. Obviously, it doesn't make much sense.
So maybe don't read it in Yiddish, but just
Yeah.
read it in translation
Yeah.
right away because
No. Okay. The big and beautiful city, which just yesterday had been alive with all its senses, was now fatally wounded, as it were, and dying. Brest-Litovsk was like a huge, healthy animal whose veins have been opened, releasing a hot torrent of blood. Minute by minute, the city grew paler, weaker, and soon it would lie there cold and dead. The city's tragic appearance was emphasized even more sharply by the planes, which were circling like black crows of a mortally injured man. The large birds of prey seemed to be waiting impatiently for the wounded giant to breathe his last, so they could pounce on him and rip off pieces from his still warm body. Ansky encounters the upheavals of war, which he addressed through strategies of description and documentation, with a similar sense of speechlessness that withdraws into a religious or autonomous interpretation of events. In Shortkov, Ansky captures the silence in the encounter, in the conversation with the local rabbi. In this case, it refers to the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, a midrashic text from the 16th century. I visited the local rabbi, Hirsch Rappaport, an elderly man who had been described to me as a great sage and Gaon. I found him bent over a book. He welcomed me warmly and listened attentively, but he remained silent and shook his head sadly. A few times he tried to say something, but couldn't find the right words. And then the rabbi points to the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. It's sad, and ink and pen will disappear. Beyond its function as a historical document that is an eyewitness account with its own historiographical, psychological, and legal interests, Ansky's diary is a literary text. The literary representation of the documented events oscillates between factographical recounting and framing the account in genuinely literary manners, with at times a highly poeticized language, draws on metaphors, similes, and references to religious texts, on multilingual expressions, we find, for instance, Russian and Polish in his Yiddish, and forms of condensed speech, especially in situations of speechlessness, of experiences hitherto unknown and undescribed. To conclude, at the turn of the 19th, 20th centuries, Jews, especially in Eastern Europe, experienced forms of violence and anti-Semitism that went far beyond previous ones. Their literary responses, be it poems, short stories, or diaries, often sought to merge literal and figurative, that is, poetic language. This is apparent not only in the case of Ansky's diary, but also, for instance, in Isaac Babet's Russian cycle of short stories, Red Army, Con Armia, or the story of a Jewish soldier, Confessions from One of Many, by Shimon Dubnow. Though both letter texts are genuinely literary representations, they are based on either autobiographical sketches, in the case of Babel, or on extensive research, in the case of Dubnow. All three texts have in common that, in order to describe the respective events and sensations, they draw both on secular writing strategies as introduced by the Haskalah, that is, historical or ethnographical documentation, as well as on religious imagery as proposed by tradition. In that way, they attempted to merge or even reconcile religious and secular interpretation using the fragment as both remembrance and poetological tool. With those genre transgressions and genre transformations, they created in modernity a poetics of rupture full of ambivalences. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Olaf. And I'm opening the floor for questions. Are there any questions, comments? Yes, Sergey. Yes, I'll give you the microphone.
Well, thank you very much for fascinating lecture. I have a question
Do you hear?
to him.
Yeah.
Since I'm sitting here and quoting from my memory, and I may be not very accurate, but one fragment, one passage in that book, Enemy at Its Pleasure, whatever, Horban Galicia, it was amazed me, was very strange to me, and maybe you can explain it to me better than I could understand. If you remember, Ansky visits the Sadi Gora, Sadhora Clois. Sadi Gora Clois now is part of Chernobyl and it has been restored, but then during the war, it was a military hospital. And Ansky is horrified with what he sees there. In Aron Kodesh, in the Torah Ark, in the shrine, there is an Orthodox icon. The soldiers probably believe that this icon saves them, pray to it, and he calls it an example of double blasphemy, something like that, because it deserves both religions. Who, in your mind, what do you think? To whom he addressed this lamentation?
That is a very good question. Thank you very much. And I've Since reading the diary for the first time, I've been asking this question myself.
Olaf, just raise a little bit the head or lower the camera. We see you all the time cut.
Okay, no, it's just because I have two screens and one is frozen, so I'm sorry. Yes, the question of who is the audience? I mean, it was published posthumously, and I think actually it should have been addressed to those who experienced similar things, or maybe, I mean, if you think about what does an eyewitness account mean, and that's why I also hinted at a legal aspect to those to this diary or lamentations, that is to be a document also used in courts. But then where could there be justice? I mean, all the states that were in war together, that is the Russian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, they ceased to exist. So there was actually, yeah, the states disappeared, and those who might be interested went into immigration. So it kind of fell into oblivion, his diary. I'm not sure whether I've answered your question, but that's maybe some ideas.
Could it be addressed to censor? Censor, military censor,
This
Censorship. The censorship.
But why censorship? I mean,
Because
he
he's pursuing Jewish methods, and he probably aimed to publish this in Russian Empire.
First he intended to publish it in Russian. That's right. But then the diary itself he wrote in Yiddish. I mean, there are pieces in Russian. That's right.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I actually have a question that sort of continues what Sergei said and what you said now. You said at the beginning that he meant to publish this in Russian, but Russian Jewish newspapers or Russian papers, or is a Russian book, and for which audience? Because afterwards, when he switches to Yiddish, it becomes actually like what Ilya was showing, an inside recording. And not for the outside world, right? But you said at the beginning he thought of doing it for outside. So when did he change his mind, and for whom did he think it originally to be published, like in Russian, right?
I mean, what he is trying to do was to raise help, right? To raise help, raise money, to add in any form he could get. And so originally, he wanted to address the Russian society as such, so as broad as possible public. But then I have the impression that he was probably thinking about what he could achieve with publishing more in that way. So that would be very critical of the Russian army. And that's actually a point, Sergei, you have raised, that wouldn't have get past the military censor or any other censor. I mean, this is also the case with Shimon Dubnov's story. It was published in 1917, but heavily censored, and only after the revolution it was allowed to be fully published. So I think that in the beginning he wanted to address a big Russian imperial audience, but had to see that he could reach probably only those inside.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? If not, then we're going to now have this again, Olaf reading on a screen, and I will try to share the PowerPoint of our last speaker, who is Professor Nathan Cohen. is currently in Warsaw in another conference, but since he was supposed to participate in this one, he was kind enough to give us his paper, and we will read it, and I will try to show the slides at the same time. So let's see how to do this. Still heavy. Yeah, I'm getting out from yours. I don't know how to turn off yours. In general, I don't know how to get to. Okay, good. We are good. All of you can start reading.
More than days and dates, Yiddish calendars.
I'm
Yep.
sorry. Stop. I forgot to introduce the Nathan Cohen. Okay, I'm sorry. So Nathan Cohen is a full professor at the Reina Costa Center of Yiddish Studies at the Department of Literature of Jewish People at Bar-Ilan University. He also serves as a co-editor of the journal Yad Vashem Studies. His main fields of research and teaching include cultural history of Jews of Eastern Europe in the 19th and 20th centuries, the history of the book and reading in Yiddish, modern Yiddish literature, the Jews of Poland between the two world wars, and Yiddish literature and culture during the Holocaust period. Along with tens of articles in peer-reviewed periodicals, Professor Cohen is the author of books, writers, and newspapers, The Jewish Cultural Center in Warsaw, 1918-1942, published in 2003, and Yiddish, The Linguistic Leap from the Common Dialect to Cultural and Literary Language, published in 2020. Both of his books were originally published in Hebrew, but were translated in Polish and English and published in Warsaw and New York. So his paper that we will present now is entitled More Than Days and Dates, Yiddish Calendars, 1875-1914. And here we are sort of leaving the anti-Semitic part and a struggle in the past to educational side of the same period. So Olaf, please.
People have used almanacs and calendars since ancient times. However, their characteristics have differed significantly according to time, place, and ethnicity. The first printed almanac appeared probably in Mainz in 1457. Almanacs were among the first printed publications in North America from 1639 onwards. Thereafter, almanacs and calendars became standard items on printers' lists. Their ephemeral, annual nature meant that they did not entail high expectations or investments regarding their aesthetics or paper quality. Indeed, their sales were essentially guaranteed. Therefore, these accessible and widespread publications were read extensively by people of all social strata, and for many they constituted the only source of information. European almanacs, as well as Russian ones, included astronomical and astrological information in addition to weather predictions and various beliefs about society and current affairs. The English Society for the Diffusion of Useful Knowledge regarded some of the most popular among them as instruments for the dissemination of ignorance and superstition. As for the definition of these terms, that is almanac versus calendar, the two are often used interchangeably. However, according to current scholarship of British almanacs, an almanac relates to a period of a year and includes, in addition to calendrical data, astronomical, and other information. A calendar presents only the days of the week and the months. Although the Yiddish publications under discussion could easily be defined as almanacs, I prefer to call them calendars due to both their geocultural context and the fact that in both Hebrew and Yiddish the term luach, calendar, is used commonly and refers to both. The first printed calendar in Poland appeared in Krakow in 1474, initially in Latin and from early 16th century on in Polish. The term almanac was used there to define a one-time or yearly anthology of literary works. The Polish calendar was a literary genre in itself, encompassing information of an encyclopedic scope. From the 18th century on, these calendars became a significant source for the popularization of knowledge as well as for the didactic insights and guidance. Many calendars included some fixed sections such as astronomical or astrological predictions, weather forecasts, information on current affairs, scientific discoveries, household and medical advice, as well as governmental rules, orders, and regulations. Yet, until the mid-19th century, Polish calendars feature very few literary works. From the 1880s, the literary content of the calendars grew continuously, usually including high-level literary works by well-known Polish authors. Polish calendars were popular among all strata of Polish society, including lay people. Their variety increased over time and included at least 9 subgenres: general or common, domestic and agricultural, popular, those for workers, for women and family, religious, professional, humoristic, satirical, and local or regional. They numbered several hundred pages, occasionally with illustrations, and they were printed and sold in tens of thousands of copies. For many, they were the main or even only source of information. Owing to their rich content, they were kept and consulted even after the end of the calendar year. The lenient censorship over calendars facilitated their publication and dissemination, even though they were also a means of strengthening Polish language and culture. Besides the influence Polish calendars exerted on Yiddish calendars in the East European context, there's a certain resemblance between the development of Lithuanian and Yiddish calendars. Both Jews and Lithuanians were relatively small minorities surrounded by powerful cultures that strove to assimilate them. Furthermore, their vernacular languages were not acknowledged by the authorities. Modern Lithuanian national identity developed as a reaction to the forced Russification and natural Polonization processes that Lithuanian society underwent throughout the 19th century. The ban was imposed by the Russian authorities in 1863 on the use of Lithuanian, marked the emergence of a need to strengthen Lithuanian national awareness among both the peasantry and the local intelligentsia. It prompted the printing and distribution of texts in the almost forgotten national tongue. A first Lithuanian calendar was published in 1845 by a Lithuanian teacher, Laurinias Ivinskis. Its 32 pages included calendrical information, weather forecasts, information relevant to farmers, and a list of fairs. In spite of various difficulties, the calendar continued to be published for 33 years. With the passage of time, these calendars doubled their extent and became guidebooks for all aspects of life. Their main was devoted to a combination of folk culture, literature, and popular scientific or general knowledge. Lithuanian calendars became a platform for national and political awareness. The first Jewish calendar appeared in 1475. From the end of the 18th century, Jewish calendars, originally a small and very focused publication, developed into a cultural omnibus. offering useful information on many aspects of everyday life. From the mid-19th century and until the First World War, alongside Hebrew calendars, the number of Yiddish calendars grew continuously and their content expanded far beyond basic calendrical information. Alongside a low estimation or even dismissal of the spoken language by learned Jewish intellectuals, who commonly regarded it as jargon, volunteer Maskilic activists worked to promote the advancement and enrichment of literary and scientific texts in Yiddish. This effort reflected the emergence of new cultural and national perspectives among growing segments of the Jewish society. The political, social, economic, and cultural changes that occurred during this period in Eastern Europe had also significant implications for Jewish society. Publishers, editors, and authors, driven by Maskilic and utilitarian motives, and subsequently by new and challenging social, cultural, or political ideas, used the accessible and widespread calendrical form to introduce the Yiddish reading public to new literary content, as well as instructive insights into various fields of knowledge, transforming the calendar into a condensed encyclopedic publication. Wall calendars, as well as book and booklet form calendars for personal use, inspired to public wall calendars in synagogues, included necessary calendrical information that facilitated both a traditional way of life and engagement with the surrounding society. For example, holidays and fast days, the weekly Torah portion, counting of the Omer, times of sunrise and sunset, the exact time of the new moon and the deadline for reciting the blessings for the new moon, the exact time of the changing of the seasons, weather predictions, Gregorian and Julian calendars, including feast days and saint days in both the Roman Catholic and Greek Orthodox churches, names and dates of birth of the Russian royal family, probably a compulsory component, Jewish and word chronicle, whereby the counting of the years was done either according to the Jewish counting or from a specific year backwards in order to prevent misunderstanding. In later years, the counting according to BC and AD became more common. Each calendar was formulated in accordance with the publisher's or editor's, later the author's program, local needs and readers' expectations. As reflections of socio-economic and cultural changes, usually influenced by Maskilic ideas, printers and editors enriched their calendars with additional features and expanded the range of information they contained to include various tariffs and taxes for official documents, postal and telegraph tariffs, travel tariffs by train and ferry, and occasionally timetables of departures and arrivals, rates of revenue stamps, locations and dates of important fairs and markets, usually within a short distance from the place of the calendar's publication, but occasionally also from a larger area, popular scientific knowledge, proverbs, jokes, and riddles, folk remedies for various illnesses, or advice for maintaining good health. Most of these features were usually copied from non-Jewish calendars. As a business initiative, most calendars included varied portions of advertisements. Many calendars were illustrated. Some calendars, mainly those called address calendars in larger communities, included lists of Jewish, state, and municipal institutions, as well as names and addresses of lawyers, physicians, pharmacists, and so on. Some calendars included religious texts relating to time, like the blessing of the new moon, or various Jewish laws or customs, for example, synagogue customs. From the second half of the 19th century, Freitas' presence in printed publications, including calendars, became more pronounced, using their full names or pseudonyms. This development enabled them to express their ideas and worldviews and makes them accessible to a wider audience. Writers associated with new social cultural perspectives, such as Yitzhak Yoel Linietsky, Shalom Yankov Abramovich, that is Mendele Mochosforim, Yitzhak Le Peretz, Mordechai Spector, Heschel Appelberg, and Avram Yitzhak Buchbinder, driven by maskilic and utilitarian motives, used the calendar form to introduce to the Yiddish reading public new literary contents, social criticism, and instructive insights into various fields of knowledge, mainly the natural sciences, medicine, and technology. From the literary perspective, the expanded modern calendars that emerged from the 1870s onward incorporated a wide range of literary texts of various genres. They were usually original compositions by well-known authors or by popular but less prestigious writers. Occasionally, they also included translations or adaptations into Yiddish from other languages, including Hebrew. With the passage of time, Yiddish calendars served also as a political and ideological agent. Although Yiddish wasn't the first linguistic choice of the Zionist movement, some of its supporters used Yiddish calendars to disseminate the Jewish national ideology. As immigration overseas increased and became a rather common plan for many, also information for immigrants was added to some calendars. An extreme expression of adapting the year cycle for disseminating social and political ideas is Yitzhak Leibush Peretz, who used the traditional Jewish holidays and commemorative dates to deliver his radical worldview in the ostensibly innocent Yontef Blättlech, which was published during his radical period in the years 1894-1895. Prominent printers and publishers such as Romm and Katzenelnbogen in Vilna and Lidsky in Warsaw, as well as public institutions such as Bikur Cholim in Warsaw or Moshevsky Nim in Vilna, and political organizations such as Kadima in Vilna or the Galician Zionist Committee in Lemberg, used the calendar form to promote their sales, activities, and agendas. Within a relatively short time, Yiddish calendars became an important means of broadening the horizons of a large Jewish readership that used Yiddish as its primary, if not sole, language of communication. Nevertheless, Yiddish calendars from various places and times received only limited scholarly attention and were reviewed and briefly discussed in just one pioneering article published by Moshe Shalit in 1929. This contribution hopes to change this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ola, for reading Nati Cohen's paper. I'm very sorry that he's not here. I'm sure there would be comments and questions, but if you do have, please contact him. This is his email, or afterwards ask me and I can give it to you again. And it's really amazing that this whole material about the calendars that he was researching and presented here was never researched. And it includes illustrations. So another topic that could be interesting for us as art historians. Yeah. I think he was working mainly in Poland in libraries, but you should ask him. Maybe in a national library. I know that he spent a year ago sabbatical working here in Israel, mainly in a national library. So I assume that he found most of them here also. Okay, so we're very much on time. And thank you for the first session, both the speakers and the audience that asked the questions and commented and developed interesting discussions.